right, welcome everybody in to another episode of the MTGO Cabal Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, P-Tarts to Win on Magic Online, and I am joined by my other co-host, Theo. How's it going today, Theo?
Hey, it's going great. I'm Theo, Theo _Jung on Magic Online, and today with us we have two special guests. One of them has been on the podcast before. One of them is a new guest. We generally try and get different people on the cast every week, but this one man, he just keeps crushing it.
Is he a man or is he a machine? Doomwake, how's it going?
What's up, guys? For those of you who don't know, Doomwake on MTGO, Twitter, and happy to be here.
All right, cool. And also joined by our in-house legacy expert, TwinlessTwin.
Yeah, what's up, guys? My name is Maxx, but I'm TwinlessTwin on MTGO and Twitter, and I am super pumped to talk some Legacy in preparation for the ManaTraders series this month. So, yeah.
Cool. So, let's start with just talking about Pioneer and your utter dominance of the format, Doom. How did your Pioneer Showcase weekend go?
I would say it went a little better than expected, maybe. I played in the Pioneer Showcase event last weekend. I actually didn't even have enough QPs. I was kind of bummed out during the whole week because I didn't really have any Q. I think I was on 30 going into Saturday around 3 p.m. and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna try and get these last QPs to try and play Pioneer because I've been playing a bunch of Pioneer throughout the week, so I wanted to, I was pretty confident in the green deck. Ended up playing 3 leagues on Saturday, went 14-1, so that gave me enough QPs to get into the event on Sunday, and then didn't lose a match. Went the full 12-0, just demolished the entire tournament. If we wanted to go over matchups, I wrote them down here. So I played against Niv 4 times, Spirits 4 times, and then Bant Control, Blue-White Control, Esper, I guess we'll call it Esper Poob, and Jeskai Fires. And yeah, I mean, the deck is just incredible. There's no deck in the format, to my knowledge, that can generate the amount of the ridiculously absurd starts that this deck can. There were several times in the tournaments where I had 10 plus mana on turn 3, and it's just, when you get those draws, it doesn't even matter what your opponent has at that point. It's, there's just nothing that can compete with those kinds of draws.
The deck was Mono Green Devotion, right?
Yes, Mono Green Devotion. Sorry about that. Yeah, and I mean, to an extent, it is a high roll deck, but at the same time, Oath of Nissa being unbanned was such a huge boon to the deck because there's a lot of draws where you are missing a key piece, whether it be an Emissary, Burning Tree Emissary, or a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, and just the added consistency of Oath of Nissa to make sure you always consistently have these busted, absurd draws. Just kind of put it over the top for me, and I just destroyed the whole tournament.
Yeah. Oath of Nissa especially seems great because it finds your enablers as well as your payoffs, because you can take a Planeswalker with it, correct?
Yes, yeah, you can take a creature, Planeswalker, or land. So there's 0 blanks, everything is a hit, and just being able to find the obviously other oaths, but just being able to find the specific piece that you're missing. And back when the inception of Pioneer, when people were playing, when it was the quote unquote Wild West, and people were playing with Just Got Copycat and Fields of the Dead and all this stuff, back in, I think it was October, November of last year, this devotion deck was pretty popular, and it contained Once Upon a Time as well as Leyline of Abundance, which it also contained Oath of Nissa. But 2 of those 3 cards are still banned in the format. And Oath of Nissa was the recent unban that, sort of sparked everybody's interest. People, me included, were trying it out in various different decks. And, as soon as I put it into this deck, it was just, a light bulb went on. And it's this is exactly what this deck was missing. And with Oath of Nissa, Once Upon a Time is a little bit more egregious because, not only did it look at 5 cards, but it allowed you to keep you would regularly keep just 0 land hands when you had Once Upon a Time, and it was obviously a little bit more nonsensical in terms of, why is this card legal? But Oath of Nissa provides a very similar, card selection, obviously not quite as powerful, but it also provides additional devotion which make your Nykthos draws better. And in some spots, it's just a free card. You just cast it and you get the mana back when you have when you activate Nykthos. So, I mean, in some spots, it's literally just a free ponder, which is just, completely absurd.
Yeah, that seems pretty great to me. So how'd you feel about the Niv matchup specifically? Because I know that's like what most people consider the top dog in Pioneer right now. And whenever I like thought about the matchup on paper, I always thought Green Devotion was a little behind. But apparently you beat it 4 times. So was that, you think, because the matchup is actually closer than what like most people might think? Or is it because maybe like your Niv opponents didn't draw very well?
I mean, probably a bit of a combination of both. Trying to go back and remember the matchups. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I got very lucky in the tournament. You can't go 12-0 with the green Yahtzee deck, as people like to call it, without getting a little bit lucky along the way. But I mean, the thing about that particular matchup is their sweepers are very conditional, right? They don't play Supreme Verdict because their mana is too bad for it. They just can't reliably cast it, and it also kills their own Caryatids. So the sweepers that they're going to are Solar Blaze and Hour of Devastation. Solar Blaze notably doesn't touch any of your Planeswalkers. So if you have a fast start and you could put a Planeswalker or 2 onto the battlefield before they can get set up, Solar Blaze isn't really going to do much because you can create a massive, overwhelming advantage with your Planeswalkers that stay on the battlefield. Hour of Devastation, also another note on Solar Blaze, doesn't kill Voracious Hydra because Voracious Hydra is always going to have 1 more toughness. So you can also just, make a 8-power Hydra and have the rest of your board, they cast Solar Blaze and you still have a giant creature in play. So Solar Blaze, not ideal in the matchup. It's good if they can cast it early to maybe if they're on the play and they have a turn 2 Caryatid, they cast turn 3 Solar Blaze, kill some of your mana creatures, but it's not going to do much when you already have a Planeswalker or 2 in play. Hour of Devastation is the other sweeper that they typically go to, and there's a couple of nuances and counterpoints that you can sort of not necessarily play around it, but not overextend into it. For example, Nissa's Plus is a May. You don't have to target a land, so you can just Nissa Plus, not target if you expect they have Hour, which did come up a couple of times in the tournament. You just Nissa Plus, don't animate your land. They cast your Hour. Your Nissa doesn't even die because it goes to 6, and then you just got to untap with all of your mana and a Nissa still in play. So, you can mitigate it like that. Also, when you Karn for a Darksteel Citadel, you can animate that to make it, it loses Indestructible. So that doesn't necessarily stop the Hour of Devastation. But I mean, and even Karn, if you're worried about an Hour of Devastation, you can just play Karn plus it goes to 6. Vivian's the one Planeswalker that doesn't necessarily get out of Hour of Devastation range the turn that you play it, but also you can just, if let's say you have maybe an X3 or X4 Hydra, you can just make that, or an X4 Hydra, you can get that out of range. But then there's just, there's enough counterplay to their sweepers because they're so conditional that I found the matchup to be pretty good obviously the games that I was losing to Niv are when they had Fatal Push, specifically Fatal Push on turn 1 for your Elf. If you get to untap with Elf, for multiple turns, usually you can create enough of a snowball advantage to get out of that. But yeah, those are really the games where you lose to Niv, is when they have early interaction, and then they can also turn for Niv. But
yeah, and how many games is like the 10 tap land deck gonna Fatal Push you turn 1 anyways, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I had seen a lot of like players, like highly regarded players on Twitter, after the event, basically being like, well, Niv is like going into the weekend was like the deck to beat, like the obvious best deck. Like they just think that like Niv might be like close to like unplayable from like a metagaming metagaming perspective, just because like there are like it's just a dog to mono green, and there's like all these other decks just like out there gunning for it. Like So like obviously like mono green is like a big reason why like Niv like won't be performing as well in the future. It has this mono green deck holding it back.
Yeah, and I think Spirits is also another like innovation
Yeah.
in response to the popularity of Niv, because a lot of your like counter spells line up really well with Niv's cards. Like Mausoleum Wanderer counters Bring to Light fairly easily, and when you're trying to resolve like a 5-drop sorcery against Spirits to get your sweeper, most of the time it's not going to resolve.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Spirits as well a little bit, as that's what I ended up playing in the showcase. I finished in the top 32 with it, and also did decently well with it the day before in the challenge, and then just in like a league as well. I had talked to kind of an innovator of the deck. I believe his name is David Traft, or that's what it is on Twitter as at least, or and his name is like Traft MTG on Magic Online, or maybe just Traft on Magic Online. Because I had put out like a beacon call on Twitter, being like, "There's no decks I really like in Pioneer. Like, does anybody have a sick list that they can like ship me for the showcase tomorrow, like the challenge tonight?" And yeah, he like DM'd me like a spirits list, and it kind of leans really heavily on Watcher of the Spheres. Which when I first saw the list that he sent me, I was like, "Well, I'm just gonna like I don't know who this guy is. Like, I'm just gonna cut this card from the deck. This looks terrible." And I was like, I told him that. I was like, how do you like Watcher of the Spheres? This card looks awful. And he's like, Watcher of the Spheres is like easily the best card of the deck. And when I started playing, and I was like, okay, well, I'll take your word for it. And I like played a league with it. I went 4-1 in the league. And Watcher of the Spheres is like actually just insane. It's literally just an Aether Vial that can attack. So like, whereas a lot of these Spirits decks will play like Collected Company as like their way of generating like mass value or something like that, I found that the Collected Company versions of Banned Spirits were just like really clunky, having this like heavy like top end 4-drop, having a lot of 3-drops, whereas with the Watcher of the Spheres, you were able to like max out on 2-drops, play a few 3-drops, like your really important 3-drops, and then more 1-drops, and like you just have this like 2-mana creature that's frequently like a 4/4 flying attacker that's letting you like cheat on like often like 2 mana every turn, like how like an Aether Vial would, which I think was a massive like innovation to the deck, and yeah, he ended up finishing second in the challenge with the deck, and then also top 8ing the showcase with it. I decided not to play Shacklegeist, where he decided to play Shacklegeist, and maybe that might have been my downfall a little bit. I haven't had a chance to try it out, but in my mind, Shacklegeist is not very good, but maybe it is worth it to play that card.
Yeah, actually, now that you bring that up, I played earlier today. We just did some testing. I played against Traft. We played a 10-match set, and yeah, the games where he was winning involved turn 2 Watcher of the Sphere. So to go back to your point on that card being one of the better cards in the deck, it's probably the deck's best turn 2 play for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to weigh in too much on Pioneer because I haven't touched the format recently, but I do have a question for Doom and Theo, which is, with the recent bannings, I think that they first unbanned Oath of Nissa, and they thought that's okay because we have Inverter, Lotus Breach in the format. Then they realized, like, we need to ban these cards anyways. People aren't enjoying them, and maybe they're a little bit too busted. So they banned them, but they left Oath of Nissa. So do you guys think that Inverter and Lotus Breach were kind of natural predators for the mono green deck? So it's kind of like a perfect storm where they both buffed the deck, but also took away the predators of the deck at the same time. Because I know I played a little bit of Pioneer, and I played Mono White Devotion in the manatraders series and aped my way to second place. But I did notice that the combo decks are some of the tougher matchups for Devotion. So they kind of took out combo and just forced the format to be so that, you know, the big Devotion ramp decks can kind of run wild a little bit.
Well, this is why they shouldn't have banned Inverter.
Says the Inverter player.
That's where we're going, huh?
I mean, I guess we won't get that deep into that circle jerk today, but I'm gonna say it's like the twin of Pioneer now. It's Injustice. It should be unbanned, and I
shake my
will
head at you,
shout
Theo.
it from the rooftops. But if you see like the two best decks right now, Green Devotion and Niftalite, they both run Oath of Nissa, like 4 copies, and I think that has a large part to do with their success, is because like it just makes those decks a little bit more consistent than the rest of the field. And I think like getting to like do your powerful thing reliably is like what you need to be doing in Pioneer. That's why I like the Green Devotion deck or like the Niftalite deck over something like Mono Black Aggro, which also top 8 of the showcase. I played a couple games with it, and it felt kind of mopey. Like you had
I don't know how
draws.
Belovo wins.
I really
I
don't
don't
know
get it.
either. I mean, he is a former professional player, so
Yeah,
that
that's
might
true.
have something to do with it. But yeah, sometimes I just be stuck with like situations where I draw a little too many fatal pushes against the stack, against like a Niv, or like draw like Thoughtseize against mono red. And just being able to smooth out your draws a little bit, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, I feel like the decks use Oath of Nissa in very different ways, where Mono Green Devotion is trying to kind of like use it in like a busted way, where it's like adding to its devotion, it's like kind of cheating to find like more consistently find like their broken draws with Nykthos, whereas like it seems like Niv is just kind of using it as like a way to like I need to find like certain colors of mana, right? So like if I'm missing a color of mana, like kind of smooth out their mana a little bit. Not to say that that's like not insanely powerful, but like
Yeah.
it's not busted how Mono Green is using it. Like I
Yeah,
feel
I mean,
like it's fine in Niv, not so much in Mono Green.
I'm not even sure that Niv would even really be that much of a deck without Oath. I think their mana is just too bad if you take out Oath.
I don't
Their
know.
mana is just atrocious.
Wasn't like Japanese Fisherman and like Claudio like doing really well with Niv like before Oath of Nissa though?
Yeah, but they're also
Well,
just sickos.
yeah, there are also going to be people just doing well with any deck
Yeah.
that play it a lot, regardless
True.
of how like good or bad it is. And I don't know, like Oath of Nissa smooths out your mana a little bit, occasionally like finds like natural Niv or like an Uro. But I think
Or
the
Sylvan
real
Caryatid, most
oh yeah,
importantly.
that's also a banger.
Yeah.
But what was I gonna say? I think the most like the biggest upgrade to Niv's mana base has been the triomes.
Yeah.
Like when you were just like running the dual lands, it was like sometimes like hard to get all 5 colors in like 5 separate lands. But with triomes, it just makes that a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And you can like cycle them like later to like get a fresh draw, which is actually pretty huge. Like you run a lot of lands, you play Uro to like ramp you along with Sylvan Caryatid. The deck just generates a lot of mana, and having the option to have like to have a card that fixes your mana in the early game, also be like a cycler and a redraw for like another Bring to Light or Niv in the late game, is pretty huge for the deck.
Yeah. No, definitely. So from finishing 32nd in the Pioneer Showcase, I was really looking up at a lot of decks, and I don't know if you noticed, Theo, but when I was looking up there at 32nd,
Oh, you got the hot 30 seconds. Exactly.
So lucky.
Wow.
I really didn't see one deck above me though. I know I finished better than all of this one deck, and I think it was like the Lotus Breach deck or something, and I I remember us having a bet last week about that. So how are your thoughts on Lotus Breach now?
Well, I'm gonna say it's still fine. I don't think it's unplayable by any means. Like, people are putting up results in leagues with it. People are playing it in prelims sometimes. But I don't know. Somehow it didn't top 16 the showcase. And if you weren't listening to our episode last week, Pete Hartz and I made a bet of whether there would be a copy of Lotus Breach.
Lotus,
top
not Breach anywhere, but Lotus
not
Field.
Breach, yeah, I guess Lotus Field now.
Lotus Field. In the top 16 of the showcase, yeah.
And there wasn't, sadly, so I owe Pete Hartz.
Sadly for who?
Sadly for Theo, happy for me.
I'm the one who has to pay out, so.
Do you guys, okay, let me ask you this. Do you guys want to take a bet on whether or not there's going to be a Lotus deck okay, what about Lotus deck in the entire field of the finals?
No, I don't know.
I would snap off that bet.
You don't think there will be, or that you do?
No,
think
that there will be.
Yeah, I think there will
Caleb
be.
Jur is playing.
I was trying to hook P-Tarts because CWS is in the event. So.
Yeah, there's people that are just gonna play garbage.
Just trying to hook them. Trying to get my free $10.
Wait, how many people are there? I'll bet you that Caleb finishes in the bottom half of the tournament, though.
There's actually going to be 2 Lotus decks because Connor's also playing it. Connor's also queued.
I'm not sure if Connor's gonna run back like Lotus Breach though.
You don't think so? He said he loved it when he was playing it on stream.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Then yeah. I will wager that a Lotus Breach deck finishes in the top half of this tournament.
You want to double or nothing?
Double or nothing, yeah.
All right, I'll double or nothing with you that the Lotus Field deck doesn't finish in the top half of the tournament.
Nice.
Man.
Now I have
Stakes
to
are getting high.
Yeah, tune in next week to see who ends up with $20 and who ends down $20.
20 event tickets, Theo. 20 event tickets.
Now P-Tarts is going to have to use his clout in the MTGO grinder community to tell everyone to bring extra dampening spheres, rig the odds.
My clout is just knowing people with clout.
That's not how that works.
Hey, it transfers, right?
Yeah.
I could play 4 dampening spheres.
You should probably play
Mono
one.
green doesn't sideboard, so you can do whatever you want.
I am going to play 1.
Yeah.
There we go.
Seems like pretty low cost to just have it there to grab with card.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, if there was like a big Pioneer event this week, what would we all be? Or if say we were all qualified for the show, say we were all as fortunate as Doom to be qualified for the showcase finals of Pioneer, what would our choice of deck be?
Oh man, I'm running it back. You don't have to ask me that question.
How about you, Thea?
I'm always in the camp of play like the best deck, so I would probably be on Niv. But I don't know. I think DooMwake does make a very convincing case that Mono Green is actually the best deck in Pioneer.
You have Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle's the best up card.
It's a good one.
Are you saying you don't want to cast a Meme Dragon?
What would you rather put in your deck, Muldrifter or Gaia's Cradle?
I know. If the Muldrifter is a 6/6 and draws you like 5 cards, then I'm going with that. I'm going with that thick Muldrifter.
Yeah, but would you rather have Guile's Cradle or like Demonic Tutor?
Yeah, all right.
Not, I guess. Light is sort of like a Demonic Tutor that puts things directly into play.
Dark Petition.
It's a Dark Petition.
That's
you
way
get the
better
mana
than
back.
Dark Petition. You're like paying 5 mana and you get the card for free.
And you can do it as
But you have to play bad colors in your deck, like white. Like, imagine playing white. I don't know.
Twinless, what would you be going with this weekend in Pioneer?
I think I would go with Niv also. But the Green Devotion deck is pretty tempting. So I think either of those would be reasonable choices. They both have been pretty proven to have results. I guess the Green Devotion deck is like a little bit more explosive. So if you're feeling lucky, you can go Devotion. And if you think you're going to draw a lot of Sylvan Caratids, you should go Niv. And that would be my call.
I know it's green Yahtzee versus 5-color Yahtzee.
I think
We'll have a link to Yahtzee.com in the description.
Yep.
I think I would play Burn this weekend. Actually, I think I would run Burn.
Dude, you're crazy.
I know. I really think Burn would be good. I think Burn is good against.
Crazy.
I think Burn is good against Spirits. I think it's good against Mono Green, and then like you can still beat Niv. I think Niv has like started trimming on the cards that beat Burn to like try and beat like these other decks, and I think it also beats Mono Black. So I think it has a lot of good matchups. But I don't know.
mono black. They're playing like fucking Bloodsoak Champion, and you're putting like
Exactly.
Soul
So there's gonna be like 5 Portuguese players playing mono black. There's gonna be like all these people who are like, oh, do mono green Yahtzee insane. I'm just gonna shock elves all day, and then I'll just have to like hope that they don't have Oath of Kai. And Traft and all those people playing blue white spirits. I'll destroy them, and then just no Oath of Kai in the Niv decks, and I'm good.
You heard it here first. Mono red is good in Pioneer.
No, not mono red, like the red white with Luris. Yeah, like the deck that me and X Whale were like playing like before the bans.
Yeah.
So what type of odds are you taking, P-Tarts, on mono red place or red white placing well in the Pioneer then?
I don't think anybody will play it, but if
Nobody's
I
gonna play it.
if I was in it, it'd be all over. It'd be all
No
over.
one's five had enough.
Yeah.
No one's five had enough.
That's the 5-head play. Traff might not even be on spirits after our session. It did not go well.
I know, like it's pretty hard to put a deck down after you've done that well with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Doom. I know.
So yeah,
I'm gonna run it back.
Oh yeah, I'm running it back. I'll change like two sideboard cards and the main deck. I mean, I don't want to change the main deck. Some people play the Llanowar Visionary over Jade Light Ranger, but I just think that the extra devotion matters. Also, it's just a bigger body.
but isn't it the same amount of mana though? Because the Visionary taps for a green.
Yeah, but like in your Nykthos, untap Nykthos with Nissa draws, it's not the same.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but Jade Light Ranger also sometimes smacks your opponent for 4.
That too, yeah. You can just play 2 Jade Lights and you have 2. Sometimes you just have 2 4/3s and you can just beat down.
All right, I got you. So I think we're pretty good to pivot away from Pioneer now, unless anybody had any other thoughts on Pioneer.
Not really. I've said
I
everything.
think we're good.
All right, and let's get into our Mana Traders format of the month, Legacy, the one that I know almost nothing about. So I'm looking to learn. I'm looking to learn from the masters today.
All right. Conveniently, every format had a showcase this weekend, so we have a lot of lists and like data to work with. There was a Legacy showcase that I played in. Sadly, I did not do very well, but I played Rug Delver. I went 1 and 2. I ran into some fairly weird matchups. Round 1, I beat the teamer like Stifle pile that's been going around.
Ooh.
And then rounds 2 and 3, I lost to Death Shadow and Lands in that order. The Death Shadow player actually ended up getting second in the event. So
that was that guy.
Yeah, I think that was pretty interesting. So yeah, starting from the top, let's top of this event. So first was Snow Miracles by Stefano G's. I believe he is Stefano Garcia in real life. He's been playing Miracles basically for a really long time now, and it doesn't surprise me that he's picked up Snow Miracles and done very well with it.
Yeah, he's a master of the archetype for sure. He's constantly, the guy who you go up against in leagues. He's been up on the trophy leaderboard a couple times. He does well in challenges. He's a pretty dedicated Legacy player from what I can tell. So it makes a lot of sense that, he was able to turn in that good result with Miracles.
Yeah, and for a while we saw the Snow deck's not doing very well, and it feels like it had a pretty good weekend this weekend with Snow Miracles in first, I guess. Does the Rug deck with Stifle count as a Snowco deck? I don't know. I don't know if it does.
I would count it as a Snowco deck.
It's more like a Ponza deck. Seriously.
I mean, it's kind of a fusion of the Delver decks and the Snowco decks, but it is like, it's Delverless Delver is what people call it, but it definitely feels a lot more like a Snowco deck in that it's playing cards like Uro. It doesn't play any of the aggressive elements of Delver except for the mana denial plan, because it's foregoing Tarmogoyf and Delver of Secrets. So it doesn't close the game fast at all, and it really just relies on disrupting the opponent's mana and then using Oko or Uro to close the game. And it also has Dreadhorde Arcanist as just a good value creature as well.
Yeah. The idea behind the deck is Stifle is sort of a way to sort of deny your opponent's mana, so your haymakers can be a lot more effective. Like, Dreadhorde Arcanist is a lot better when your opponent can't play a threat on 2. And Stifle does a pretty good job at, like, I guess, like, sort of stunting your opponent's mana development. Some of the time, not all of the time. Sometimes your opponent goes like Ancient Tomb Chalice, and you look at the
right,
and you feel pretty bad about that.
Well, but then you can stifle the Chalice trigger, right?
Oh yeah, I've stifled Chalice triggers in my day.
I wonder if this teamer deck wants Life
twice.
from the Loam. I wonder if this teamer deck wants Loam.
The Delverless one?
Yeah. There's Uro and Wasteland.
Just for Wasteland and Uro. It's interesting. The one thing I will say about Loam and like a non-conventional Loam deck, there was a time when Rug Delver would actually run Life from the Loam as like a value card to recur Wastelands and like in Wasteland mirrors if you're getting Wastelanded. But it's usually like a one of in the sideboard. And sometimes people would even run cards like Barbarian Ring or something. There were some, Rug Delver experts who would go really deep with stuff like that. I think overall Life from the Loam is like a little bit underwhelming if you're not going to be playing other utility lands, but in the right meta, it can be a good counterplay to mana denial. Or if Astrolabe gets banned, you could revisit Life from the Loam if people start moving back to dual land centric mana bases potentially.
True.
The Wasteland stock is kind of low right now. As not super low. It's still a good card, obviously, but it's lower than it has been in the past for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that makes Loam a little bit worse as well.
Sorry, my roommate asked me if I wanted to order pizza.
What was your
anyway,
answer?
I said yes.
Yeah, snap it off.
Yeah.
Snap it off.
Just no pineapples.
What are your go-to toppings?
I don't know. I like pepperoni. I actually like bell peppers on my pizza. I don't know if I'm like
green peppers.
Yeah, the bell peppers.
Oh yeah, those are pretty good. Man,
I like crispy pepper could be good.
I like olives.
People like to roast me in my chat about liking broccoli on pizza, but it is what it is.
I don't know. That does sound pretty unappealing, dude.
No, it's so good. It's so good, man.
All right. Anyways, enough pizza talk.
I'm hungry now.
Theo's getting back to business.
I'm going on the Domino's app right now. You guys are making me hungry.
All right, back to Legacy. So in second place, we have Blue-Black Death Shadow, as we said. Max, I know you had some thoughts on the deck. Why did it do so well this weekend, and how is it positioned going forward?
Yeah. So Blue-Black Shadow, one of its biggest weaknesses is Swords to Plowshares. That card is, first of all, just a very efficient answer to any of their threats, as it always has been a very good card against Delver decks, any type of tempo creature-based deck, because if you're trying to play efficient threats, efficient answers is the scariest thing. But it's especially good against Death Shadow when you're trying to lose life. And you can't put multiple Death Shadows into play, or you risk getting 2 for 1. And it also just makes all your future Death Shadows worse. So when a plow deck is like on top of the meta or up there, then I think Death Shadow is a very tough choice. It's also surprising to see Death Shadow return because Ice Fang Quaddle is a very good card against Death Shadow as well. And they just don't have as many efficient answers to cards like Oko, Quaddle, and Plow. So I guess what really might have allowed Death Shadow to be successful is a lack of snow decks and Plow decks in general. And if you do look at the metagame, the top decks, according to Goldfish, so I guess it's just covering the top 32, so it's not a complete picture, but of the successful decks, Teamer Delver or Rug Delver, pretty offensive. They call it Teamer Delver in my opinion. Is the most represented deck. That matchup I think goes a little bit in Shadow's favor. Obviously, it requires good pilots on both sides because a Death Shadow deck versus a Lightning Bolt deck can have some maneuverability for sure. But Death Shadow's threats just tend to be a little bit bigger than the Rug threats. And they do have Fatal Push for your Goyfs. So I think that they're just a little bit ahead in the matchup. Hogak probably, I don't know. Hogak is probably close for Shadow. It seems similar. The thing about Hogak is like it doesn't lose to graveyard hate from Delver decks as much as it loses to specific draws. Like any Delver Wasteland Force draw can be enough to put Hogak far enough behind that they can't come back. So that's probably reasonable for Shadow, I'd assume. Esper Vial. Esper Vial is a pretty 5-head deck.
Shadow.
Yeah, Esper Vial is a really hard deck to play though.
Also a Vial deck. Yeah, and everyone who played Esper Vial and did well in this tournament are people who have been playing it for a fair amount of time. And
yeah, it's definitely not a deck you can just pick up in a similar way to Legacy Death and Taxes, except for now you're having to cast spells like Brainstorm as well. So yeah, you're combining a lot of different hard elements.
The dude who invented the deck, Jeff Lynn, has been playing it for like years now, and honestly, I don't know why we didn't put like good cards like Brainstorm and like Force of Will into Vial Shells way before we ended up actually adopting it. But yeah, that's probably like an unexplored like part of Legacy for a very long time until this Esper Vial deck sort of broke out.
Oh, for sure. And Jeff Lynn has been like a big innovator for a while. I've played him a couple times and he always has a sweeper. The other deck he plays is like a blue-white tempo shell that plays cards like Fathom Seer. And just imagining Fathom Seer seeing play in Legacy. So what the card does is it's like a gush, but it's on a morph creature. So you morph it in and then you can transform it by bouncing 2 islands and then you draw 2 cards and it's a 1/3.
Can you imagine?
And I can't believe that card is seen play in Legacy, but he manages to make it work.
Oh my god. Can you imagine wastelanding your opponent and then they flip up their morph and it's a Fathom Seer and they get to bounce their island that you
they gush you, yeah. Oh, the value. And it plays cards like Weathered Wayfarer, which like tutors for lands and stuff. Like that's like cards that like didn't even see play in modern Death and Taxes, which is an unplayable deck. So it's really interesting how he makes the piles work. But yeah, Esper Vial is a pretty cool deck for sure. It makes something out of nothing is the way I like to see it. Like it's doing nothing, and then all of a sudden they have a huge board presence and you're like, well, I guess I'm out of this one.
Yeah. The main engine of that deck is Soul Herder plus Recruiter of the Guard. So it's like a 1-card engine, right? Because Recruiter of the Guard finds Soul Herder, and then you keep like looping your Recruiter of the Guard with Soul Herder to find whatever you need in like certain situations.
Yeah, in my opinion, I would say, I guess it depends on the matchup. But in the fair matchups, Recruiter of the Guard is by far and away the best card. It's like Force on Site. It's the card that enables all of their value chains, basically. And otherwise, you force them into a game where they're playing, more of like a 1-for-1, like weak Taxes game with Meddling Mage. And I think that's much more beatable from the fair side of things than the crazy chains that can get going.
Recruiter really is the card that makes that deck tick, I think. And also Recruiter is not that bad against combo either, especially if you have a Violent play. On 3, you can just cast it and grab like a Meddling Mage. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, like the natural curve of turn 1 Vial, turn 2 land, turn 3 Recruiter, Vial's on 2 already. Yeah. So you're just ready to put in Meddling Mage, which is just the Meddling Mage is like, some people have called it the new Thalia of Legacy, in that a lot of people have started to use it. I think it's trending down a little bit, except for the Esper Vial deck, but it was getting adopted in decks like Miracles too, as a just a sideboard card for decks like Blue-Green Omni, because trying to play counter spells against Veil of Summer just isn't going to cut it anymore. So once the combo decks are adapting to play Veil, then you need to combat them by either denying them their payoffs or, cards like in play permanent hate like Deafening Silence, Aethersworn Canonist. So that's kind of been a shift in the Legacy metagame, and Meddling Mage it's a pretty cool card. So I'm happy to see it show up.
Yeah. And in third, we have Elves. And it looks
Theo's
like
favorite deck.
I do love me some Elves. So how I actually started learning this deck is I opened Allosaurus Shepherd in a treasure chest. And I was just like, well, might as well play some Elves. And I ended up really liking the deck. So the deck has come a long way since it first was introduced in Legacy. It used to be this finicky sort of elf ball combo deck that relied heavily on Glimpse and Nettle Sentinel and Heritage Druid. Just cast a bunch of elves and then grape shot your opponent. And then people adopted Natural Order plus Craterhoof Behemoth into the deck. And that Nettle Sentinel Heritage Druid package was still in there. But now it's surprisingly become an Elvish Reclaimer deck of sorts. So I've talked to the person who popularized this, I think Newton Hang. He's put up a bunch of results with elves. He won the last, I believe, Mox showcase in Legacy with elves. And Elvish Reclaimer is a great way for these decks to sort of have game against combo game one, because it can tutor up Bojuka Bog. It also just goes and grabs Cradle when you need to go up on mana. And and Allosaurus Shepherd is another great addition. It allows you to sort of opponent has to sort of respect the Green Sun Zenith for one now. And force to will that, because it can go grab Allosaurus Shepherd and they can cast Natural Order, and then you can't really counter that.
Yeah.
Also, it allows you to play through a Chalice. So you just go grab, when your opponent chalices you on one, you just go grab an Allosaurus Shepherd with your Zenith and just start casting your 1-drops into Chalice. And that's been a really good tool for the deck in certain matchups.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think Allosaurus Shepherd has been probably the biggest upgrade Elves has seen in a while. They have retooled for the Reclaimer. I guess from the Delver perspective, I haven't really been super afraid of Reclaimer. It's very clunky, and a lot of times you can just bolt it if it's scary. But it puts a land into play taps, and then you just wasteland them. So,
it's also really good against Wasteland, right? Because you can leave up a Reclaimer activation, and if your opponent tries to Wasteland you can just activate Reclaimer in response.
That can be true also. Yeah. Yes, yeah. It is board dependent, but as long as Delver isn't far behind, I think it's not as scary. But Allosaurus Shepherd, on the other hand, is very scary for Delver. I think that it's caused at least me to rethink how I sideboard a little bit. I've had to respect elves a lot more recently. I've moved up to a second sweeper in the sideboard just to make sure that we have more ways to contain the board from elves. Cards like Daze, which I think used to be pretty reasonable, just because Natural Order, and sometimes if they're constrained on mana because you wasteland them or something, if you could waste their Cradle, they become a little bit worse because they have Shepherd, and you need to be forced to play a little bit more to the board in the matchup. So, I can only imagine that it's even more scary from a deck any deck that's trying to resolve a Critical Force of Will against elves for the payoff, now has one more threat to worry about. And there are some pretty scary elves already. So just getting to add that extra elf that's a must deal with from the blue side, kind of has made elves have a little bit closer to a critical mass to help the matchups.
Yeah, I imagine if you're playing something like Snowco, Allosaurus Shepherd is actually just the nightmare.
Terrifying.
Yeah, because in addition to making their Natural Orders uncounterable, it also doubles as a threat, because with a Gaia's Cradle in play, it turns all the elves into 5/5s.
Right. Yep. That's right. Yeah, one thing I will say though is, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say one sweet thing about Shepherd is I really like when some of my less experienced Elves players get too comfortable with their Shepherd in play, and then you can have sweet lines like have force of will, and then like bolt their Shepherd, force the natural order when they go for it, or even sweeter is when you tap out and you have submerge for their Shepherd, and then you submerge their Shepherd and force their natural order, and that just like puts them out of the game. So I mean, Shepherd's still really good, but I do like that it creates some of those, more interesting dynamics where they have to take some risks and go for some payoffs if they might not, have the Allosaurus Shepherd protection or not.
Well, into your point, they're not always safe. You can as long as you kill the thing with the natural order on the stack, then.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm not really surprised to see Elves do well in this tournament. It's like traditionally been very good against fair decks. And in a tournament like this, a lot of people are going to be playing those blue brainstorm decks. So no surprise that Elves is in third place here. And in fourth place, we have our favorite Teamer Delver.
Oh, I'm a
As Max
100%
Teamer
Delver win rate player right now.
You want to know?
No, I'm 2-0. Haven't dropped a match.
Oh, boy.
2-0.
Wow.
Max, what do you want to do? You want to go into our Delver spiel now, or save that until we go through the rest of this top 8?
Yeah, I think we should hit. I'll briefly say, I think Delver is just always not always, but is right now. It's a pretty reasonable deck. It always has aggressive draws. It's a force of will brainstorm deck, and it just it has game against everything. So it's not surprising to see some Delver players do well, especially if you're more practiced in the legacy format and you have a lot of format knowledge, and you know what to counter, what role to take in each matchup. Then Delver is just a good deck to register. So. We'll save the rest for after we hit. I do have
a question for you though, Twinless. How do you feel Delver is for someone who doesn't have the format knowledge?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting because I think that Delver is the deck that people, I guess there are a couple decks in Legacy that people would want to stay away from or think they should stay away from. They've heard it was really hard, and I think Delver does get a little bit overrated in terms of how hard it is, but I do think that the format knowledge is important. So it's not about never having played Delver before. It's more about like knowing Legacy as a whole, because if you're just dazing at a whim and just firing off your dazes and you're just forcing random cards because you don't know what you're doing, then you're going to put yourself in a spot that is very unfavorable for you. But as long as you know like how to attack other strategies, like what are their key cards, then I think the Delver is a deck you can pick up. And the good news is manatraders gives you a whole month. So I think Delver is a very reasonable deck if you've played blue decks before. It's a deck you could pick up now, and I think that it's pretty rewarding if you practice it a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly a lot more forgiving than the non-blue decks because the card Brainstorm just bails you out of a lot of jams.
So my experience of playing Spirits this weekend and playing a tempo deck with blue attacking creatures, I'm just a Delver expert now, I guess.
Brainstorm is like the fairy godmother, as the true great would say.
It's like you boarded it and it's a random deck.
I thought Arcbound Ravager was the fairy godmother that sits on your shoulder and says,
"Now it's Brainstorm."
You can't call yourself a Delver player though if you're also playing what you would describe as a flying Aether Vial, because Delver players hate Aether Vial. So it's one or the other.
I know. I'm a pretty big Vial enthusiast, and I play a lot of Delver too, so I might be the odd one out.
You're the Delver Taxes player. Very interesting combination of decks there.
Oh, they're like pretty similar. They're sort of like mildly aggressive resource denial decks.
One thing I wanted to bring up about the decks we've already talked about and kind of like just looking at the rest of this field is like it seems like Chalice of the Void is like heavily underrepresented and is also like quite good against a lot of these decks. Is it just that like these decks like the Chalice is just kind of like so slow or so bad against like certain decks like that it's not worth playing it, or like why is Chalice's stock so low at the moment? Like whether it's Mono Red Prison or like Eldrazi or the blue Karn Echoes deck or anything like that.
So I'm going to offer two reasons as to why that's the case. So the first reason is that it's a showcase event, and there are a lot of showcase events this weekend. So people are generally going to play the formats they like are the most comfortable with. So not very many people are, I guess, priced into playing Legacy when they can play the Pioneer Showcase earlier. So there are going to be less like newer players to Legacy showing up with these Chalice decks. So it might be that they're underrepresented. And I think the second reason is that I don't think Chalice decks have a very good Delver matchup.
Interesting. Is
So
that a hot take?
I think it's a.
I don't think it is anymore. It was for a little bit, but I think people have started to realize.
Yeah. I think that's like the best kept secret of the Legacy format is that Chalice decks are like not very good against Delver. And like
Yeah.
well, on paper it seems very good for these Chalice decks, right? Because you have cards like Blood Moon and you have Chalice, and the other deck is full of 1-drops. It's like it looks very good on paper. And the games you lose, it's very convincingly in the Chalice player's favor. So like the games where they go like Chalice for 1 on the play and then Blood Moon you, and you don't really have any plays, then those games are going to look like the Chalice player is just like absolutely dominating the Delver player.
So
But
do
a
you
lot
think
of
the reason for that is like the reason why Chalice decks are not good is because the Delver decks have so much counter magic that like it almost plays like a combo deck that's all in on their Chalice, and then it's like you force my Chalice, and it's like the rest of my deck is like just garbage cards or whatever, and or like you just like go in all in on this Chalice. I go like turn 2 Goyf, and it's like well like I have like a fucking Blood Moon. Like what am I gonna do?
well, the first thing is that the matchup is really play draw dependent, I think. So there are like 6 cards on the draw that Delver can use to interact with the Chalice player's turn 1 play, and they have to be in your opening hand. Like you have to be able to force a Chalice on the draw. But when the Delver player is on the play, then they have access to Daze as like sort of an answer to their opponent's turn 1 Chalice. So like the games where you get free wins off like turn 1 Chalice usually only happens on the play for the Chalice player because the Delver player has so much more interaction when they're on the play towards your turn 1 Chalice.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah. The other one-word answer I would offer up that Theo didn't specifically say is Oko, which is just really good against Chalice decks. The Blood Moon deck, if they resolve a Blood Moon, not as much. But against the Eldrazi deck, it does everything. Like now there are games where even if you are on the draw, if you like, go turn 1, you don't get to do anything because they Chalice to you. Turn 2, you have Goyf, and say you have a Force of Will for their first threat, and then turn 3 Oko. Now you have a Goyf. You get to Elk their Chalice. Goyf blocks all of their stuff usually. And then you have Oko just like pumping out, Elks, and you just win the game. So the Eldrazi matchup especially has been really impacted by Oko. The Mono Red Prison deck, I think, has other issues aside from Delver. Arkham's Astrolabe being a big one, just making Blood Moon so much worse. But I think that the Eldrazi deck is the most popular Chalice deck, although maybe Doom will want to talk about the 4-color Loam deck.
I was going to
but yeah, so Eldrazi being the most popular, Oko is just very powerful against it, and so is Tarmogoyf. So I agree with Theo fully that Chalice decks they lose their equity they used to have against old Delver decks, and so just overall like their game plan also isn't usually as powerful as the other Legacy decks, so they're a little bit more dependent on Chalice than other Legacy decks are dependent on any specific card as well.
Yeah, and you can just Oko their Chalice if they resolve it. Like usually before Oko, Delver decks didn't used to have an answer for Chalice if it ever ended up resolving. Well, now they do, and like you can turn their Chalice into a 3/3, which you can bolt, or which you can just ignore a lot of the time if you have Oko in play.
Yeah.
And Wasteland is a big thing against those Chalice decks too, from the Delver side, is that if you force their like turn one play and then you Wasteland their like Soul Land, sometimes they just can't play the game from that point.
So,
'Cause
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because their deck is full of like 2, 3, and 4, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Like, just like the card Wasteland just does so much to like help these decks to like make these decks just not be able to play Magic. Yeah, that was my point.
So you brought up in one of like your points about the Chalice decks was that like this was kind of like people's cup of tea and like they're not like forced into like playing like Legacy. So kind of what I have to like think about that is like in terms of mana traders this month, people kind of are like priced into playing. Like they're just gonna like me. Like I don't play Legacy at all, and like I'm gonna play Legacy and mana traders this month because like it's free. So how do you think that impacts the format, and does that change like what deck you think is better to play in like the league portion of the format, and does it go back to normal for the Swiss, or how do you kind of feel about that?
So I would say there is going to be a lot more decks like Reanimator and Chalice that you don't see represented a lot in these big tournaments because those are the decks that newer players to Legacy tend to gravitate towards. And I would say you should build your Delver deck like differently when you're playing in like a showcase event versus these Mana Traders queues. So I think Tarmogoyf stock goes way up, like when you're playing against like a lot of Chalice decks, because it's probably your best threat against them. So for these Mana Traders queues, I've ended up like cutting an Arcanist and like a Hooting Mandrills from my Delver deck and just playing the full set of Tarmogoyfs because they're very good in the mirror, as well as being a very good turn 2 play that dodges Chalice against these like Red Prison style decks.
But like it does, it's mostly just like little changes like that. It's nothing sweeping. Like you're gonna play like one deck to like beat up all of these like kind of like noob decks or whatever.
Well, the thing about trying to metagame for Legacy is that sometimes people are just gonna play whatever they want.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the modern problem, right? Like
I lost the Pox on stream. Pox.
Yeah, there. So for me, I went 7-3 and I played 2 different decks. And I think they were both fine decks. But what I ended up doing is I started with Delver, which is what I wanted to play. I was, on the full 4 Goyf. Theo and I had talked about it and we agreed it made sense. I think you often end up like shaving a Dreadhorde Arcanist against a lot of Chalice decks anyways. So just starting on 2 and having the Goyf to punish non-blue decks is pretty good. I went 3-2, but I don't think it was a reflection of Delver being bad. First of all, 3-2 isn't the worst. I mean, 60%, but like obviously you're hoping to do a little bit better than that. But yeah, I had some like I was streaming it, so I'll say like the draws were not very good that I had. Like sometimes the cantrips just missed, so I caught some bad variants. Went 3-2. But then I did try to metagame it a little bit, and I went with Turbo Depths for the next half. Negator 77 has been just like destroying Legacy leagues with the deck. And one of, Merit Lage's biggest problems is Swords to Plowshares, which I did think would be underrepresented. So, if you're playing 4 Pithing Needle for the Wasteland problem, then you can just kind of focus your deck on being able to attack from that angle and not worry as much about the plow. And I went 4-1 with that. So you could metagame it. I think Delver is still a reasonable choice. But I will say, like, my matchups, I ran into Infect. I ran into 2 variations of Mono Black, which is just not an actual deck. One had Tiny Bones. The other had this, like, 2-drop Fairy Rogue that gives all of your fairies a 1/1 counter when they enter the battlefield, and then it makes you discard whenever a creature with a 1/1 counter deals damage to you.
Bro, I played that.
And then they were playing like Prowl creatures like Prowl, where you get a discounted 5/3 that cranial extractions. So there were some weird things going on in the qualifiers for 4. I also played against the Glimpse Cheerios deck. But the thing is, Force of Will is not bad against some of those all-in decks. Like if people try to bring Belcher and Cheerios and just try to cheese wins, then Force of Will is where you want to be. So it's kind of hard to metagame because people might bring, like Stompy decks and stuff, or they might bring the all-in combo decks. So I would just, if you have played Legacy before, play what you're comfortable with. If you haven't, I feel like my recommendation would be Turbo Depths. It does require a little bit of practice, so maybe run a league first. But I think that Turbo Depths has a pretty robust, resilient plan, and also there's, if people aren't as aware of what to do against it, then you get some edges from that as well. And you just have discard spells with your combos, so you get to disrupt their combo.
Yeah, I ended up, I played my manatraders matches mostly Monday, and I played 4-color Loam. For those who aren't familiar, it's basically just Mox Diamond, a couple like Life from the Loams to recur, Wastelands, and then you have a Knight of the Reliquary tutor package. But yeah, I ended up going into, I played against mostly Eldrazi. I think I played against 4 Eldrazi decks. And then my losses were, Ninjas, which I think is probably a close matchup, and then I ended up losing to one of the Eldrazi players because they just kind of had the nut draw. But yeah, I mean, I was pretty impressed with 4-color Loam. I actually wanted to ask you, Theo and Twin, what your opinions on the 4-color Loam versus Delver matchup, because I know you guys were saying, you're talking about Chalice decks not being as favored against Delver as they used to be, but does that do we change the equation when we now add Abrupt Decay and actual basic land, so like you can theoretically be protected from Wasteland with Forest, Mox, Chalice? How do you guys feel about that matchup?
I think it's way worse for Delver than traditional Chalice variants, because first of all, your cards aren't as clunky. It's Chalice and other 2-drops, which aren't as unreasonable. So the mana denial plan isn't as reliable there as it is against something like Eldrazi. It's just a pile of cards that's just good against Delver. The deck runs 4 Abrupt Decays, and it and it
to be fair,
Knight of the Reliquary. How are you? I have almost never beaten a Knight of the Reliquary with Delver before. That rarely, if ever, happens.
You have Oko now, so that might change the equation.
Yeah, I guess
for sure. Oko can help. So my take on it, and I've gone back and forth a little bit. Because funnily enough, I think this is how it started, but I played 4-color Loam just in preparation for manatraders, just to try it out, and I went on a 9-1 run, never having touched the deck before, and then I hyped it up in the Cabal chat, and then 603 Leb started playing it, and then he got other people to start playing it, and then I ended up getting off the deck, but it is a good deck, and I think it's a better Chalice deck against Delver. But I also feel that Delver has kind of evolved with Dreadhorde Arcanist and Oko to be a more mid-rangey deck. And there are definitely the Delver draws where you can just play a mid-range game as well as the Loam deck can. Because the Loam deck has its strong draws, but it also has a little bit more inconsistency in terms of, how powerful Mox Diamond is in accelerating your draws. Cards, if you can, bolt the Dark Confidant on turn 2 and then Wasteland them, you can put them behind. Decay, I think, there's 2 ways to view it. Decay is obviously very good against Delver, but it also almost suggests that the Loam deck feels it needs threats to tech against Delver, because Decay, one of the best, Decay is, I think, in a lot of people's minds, really targeting decks like Delver. It is an efficient removal spell and one of the best ones if you're trying to play Chalice on one. But it's very commonly thought of as, a card that you do use to tech against Delver. So
right.
I've won from both sides. I played against a Delver player playing the Loam side, and I beat them in a close set of 3 matches, and I won from the Delver side. There are cards like Submerge, cards like Oko, just really powerful haymakers that can swing a matchup. So I think that either side can take it. But if you do, I don't know if I'd recommend 4-color loam because it has a lot of mulligan decisions that you have to be,
Right.
able to make. But I do, and I think you agree with this, Doom. Mulliganing is like the hardest part of the deck. And then
Yes.
it sort of starts to play itself after you mulligan correctly. So it could be a reasonable deck to pick up. And I think that it has very reasonable matchups across the field if combo's underrepresented, which it has been recently.
Still playing against Sneak
as
and Show.
as long as people don't start picking up like Belcher and Sneak and Show and stuff like that, then I think it's a very reasonable choice to pick up 4-color loam.
Yeah, I feel
You
like
definitely push Snow Codex.
it seems like a lot of these decks that are really, really weak to combo kind of like are able to make leeway for themselves, since the Esper Vile deck just seems so like toxic to combo decks. Like, I don't see how a combo deck like has any shot against an Esper Vile deck, and that just seems like so suppressive of those decks. You know what I mean? That like combo's just not like a great place to be right now.
Yeah, spell-based
Yeah.
combo is
Negation also.
yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Spell-based combo is probably the worst it's been in Legacy in a while. Yeah, because of what Max said, like Force of Negation, and like instead of Thalia, you get to like play against Meddling Mage, which is much worse. But yeah, this is why you don't see like decks like Ad Nauseam Tendrils or the Epic Storm that heavily represented in these Legacy tournaments. Is because like all these blue decks have access to 5+ forces game 1 now.
Yeah.
And these, like little adaptations in the metagame.
The other
They've
combo deck
also
that
printed. Oh, go ahead, Doom.
I was going to say, the other combo deck that I see that there was a couple of copies in the top 32 of this event here was Dredge. So that might be something, if you want to play combo, that might be a good place to start too.
Yeah. The thing about Dredge is that like it doesn't really need to resolve one spell. Like Storm decks need to resolve their like Tutor effect. Sneak and Show decks need to resolve like Show and Tell. So like forms of disruption like Force of Negation or like Meddling Mage aren't very like great against Dredge, because like once they like pitch their hand and they have a Dredger, it's like pretty easy for them to grind you out from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a couple things I'll say about Dredge. So first of all, I'll start with the blanket statement of I think graveyard decks are pretty poor in Legacy in general. I think that the tools they get, like, okay, first of all, Reanimator, it does count as a graveyard deck, I guess, but it's kind of different than like set aside Dredge and Hogak. So Dredge and Hogak are both decks that, try to abuse graveyard synergy for sure. Dredge is the more explosive, but less consistent deck, and Hogak is more consistent, but less explosive. But I think both of them have the problem of Force of Will is a very good card against them, and Force of Will is a very widely played card, as well as people can just play the graveyard hate and it's still super effective. And I also find that they just lose, like, when a graveyard deck is losing and it isn't because of graveyard hate, that's a bad sign. And I think that in Legacy, there's kind of a point that's been reached with Force of Negation as well, that a lot of decks are able to beat Dredge, they're able to beat Hogak without even needing a heavy graveyard hate. Like even something as simple as Surgical Extraction is enough to give them that push that they win. And I think that that's why I wouldn't recommend graveyard decks. Obviously, if you're looking to pick up a linear deck and run the lottery, you can. And Dredge does a lot of the time like have one pilot that might cheese their way into a top 8. But I think that I would probably rather go with a Stompy deck than a Dredge deck if I had to make the decision. The other thing, the Dredge pilots, they hate this one trick, but I learned the other day.
Dredge pilots hate this one trick.
They do. Dredge straight up scoops to double Surgical. If you Surgical Icarid Narcomoeba, they literally can't do anything. The only thing they can do is some decks play like a one of Ox. So like theoretically, they might be able to flip their deck an Ox and then like sack it to Cabal Therapy to make a bunch of zombies. But other than that, which is like pretty inconsistent. So imagine this though, right? Like if you're able to go Surgical Narcomoeba and then Dreadhorde Arcanist, flashback Surgical on Icarid, then like what can they do? Or if you have Snapcaster Mage in your deck and you just go surgical, snap, surgical. So like the fact that Dredge is so weak to even something like surgical extraction is kind of concerning, because usually a deck like Dredge is more resilient than that. So those are all reasons I wouldn't play Dredge. I also am pretty tilted about Dredge right now because they just snatched away a 5-0 from me on stream last night. So I'm raging on it a little bit extra hard because I definitely feel robbed. But yeah, I do think that genuinely it's not going to, in the long run, turn in a win rate that is comparable to other decks in Legacy. So
one question I do have for all the Legacy experts in the call today is why no sideboard guides in Legacy? It's really blocking my entry to the format. I need a Teamer Delver sideboard guide.
The answer is P-Tarts. Play a deck with Karn the Great Creator. You don't have to sideboard.
Oh, that's true.
Might have to play Karn Echoes.
Karn Echoes. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are some people creating content. I think that part of it is like the Legacy community is just very different than a lot of other Magic communities and how they like do things. So I guess like it's not as spiky. It's more about, you know, like culty followings behind one deck. So there's like a bunch of people and personalities in the community, like Brian Cook, who's just, you know, the epic Storm. There's Cyrus Cormangill, who's, you know, regular Storm. There's like the Elves guy. So it's a lot more of that. And I don't know why I guess some of them probably do make sideboard guides. I can cook you up. I can cook you up a Rug Delver sideboard guide if that's what you want to roll.
Ooh, Twinless. Ooh, if you can get...
I can cook it. I can cook it up. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We're in now, boys.
Max, we can collab on a sideboard guide.
Oh, there's no losing now.
Patreon money.
Yeah. Well, Theo and I might go together. We can consult some of the other. There are some other really big Delver players. I guess the ones that come to mind is Learn to Love, Waka Rock, IB True. Those are all like people who play a lot of Delver. Ghoul Dukat also does. Ghoul Dukat really had a pretty spicy Delver list recently that he released on his Patreon. So if you're a subscriber there, you can go check that out.
Ooh, with a sideboard guide?
He does have a sideboard guide.
It did have a sideboard
guide.
Any sideboard guiders?
I like strongly disagreed with a lot of his choices, but that guy is just a genius. So we could both be right, honestly, and maybe he just has a different take.
I can't really understand how his brain works a lot of the time, but he wins a lot more than I do. So I'm inclined to trust his deck building choices.
So we are kind of coming close to like where we would normally cut the podcast. Was there any last things that anybody wanted to say about Legacy or any other formats or anything going forward or looking back?
Yeah, going forward. So one question that you asked is it going to be the same for the playoffs for manatraders as it is for the qualifier rounds? And I'd say no is my answer. The metagame is going to look a lot more conventional and what you see in these showcases, because I think like a lot of these like Chalice decks aren't going to be hitting that consistent like 70 or 65% to qualify for the next round. So yeah, I just like treat the playoff event as if it were just like a normal big Legacy Magic Online event.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, I would agree with Theo. Like I would go back to only 3 Goyf. I think that the other thing is like some of the more dedicated Legacy players might be more excited to put more time into it, whereas like some of the people just playing ape decks, if they don't spike in the first 10 matches, they might just give up. Just because they're like, whatever, I'm off it. They'll like tilt and be like, how did they beat my Chalice of the Void? Right? So whereas like if you're a Miracles master, you're like, I'll play, 50 matches of Miracles. I don't even care, right? Like I'll just keep going. I love this all day. Maybe you get aped out by a Chalice deck and you stop for the day, but the next day you're right back at it because Legacy is what you live and breathe. So I think that also will play into it because the more matches you play, manatraders lowers the threshold of win percentage. So just naturally, more people will make it in the more committed they are. So yeah, I would go back for Delver specifically. I would go back to a more stock list where you're more prepared for blue decks in the metagame. I do still think that the metagame will have a little bit more Eldrazi decks. It'll be closer to something like I don't know, not like the challenges, because the challenge, any event where it's like self-selecting and there's not a lot of incentive to play if you don't play Legacy, is always heavy blue. But whenever there's like external incentives like manatraders has created where it's free and there's a big payout, then the metagame does shift a little bit more towards the linear decks. And I think Delver is a good choice. I really do. It's the best deck with no good matchups. And yeah, if you
best deck with no good
if you want to,
it's NBC Road,
it really does.
NBC
it literally
Road, no bad
has
cards.
it has like zero good, like very good matchups
Really?
right now, but none of the matchups are really that bad either.
So you don't
It's
think
just
Delver?
Jund.
Delver
It's
is
literally just
always-
Legacy Jund.
oh.
Don't call it Jund, dude. It's way better than that.
Yeah,
Theo-
it's way better than
it's
Jund.
like-
Theo
It's
tells
like
me-
if Jund was good.
It's like the team of wreck of Legacy.
Yeah,
And that, it has
That's
like
all good
matchups on
matchups.
paper.
Theo says that Teamer Delver is tier 0 of Legacy. Do you agree, Twinless?
Well, it is.
um
I would agree with that.
Okay.
tier
if-
0 is tough because that suggests that it's like way more busted than other decks, and I don't think it's way more
True.
busted as it is way more consistent at executing its game plan. So
well,
I think that it's very good at executing a good game plan, and its game plan is good. I wouldn't call it tier. When I think tier 0, I think decks like Hogak and Modern, or like those types of decks, and I wouldn't say it's reached that level. And there are actually, I know there are a lot of Delver players who are kind of off the deck right now, or think that they'll play it because they play Delver, but they don't think it's as well positioned as it has been in the past. But I still think it's a very good choice. It's definitely tier 1, and you'll have game against everything. So if that's what you consider to be tier 0, then yeah, it's tier 0. But I wouldn't want to mislead people to thinking that you're just going to be free rolling wins with the deck, because it doesn't free roll that many.
I wouldn't quite say it's tier 0, but I'd say it's like half a head above what the rest of the format is doing. I feel like it doesn't have any good matchups, but it wins anyways because the cards are like the
I don't
most.
understand. This is like
No,
that's
insane.
literally what-
This is insane.
That's exactly what's so amazing, and what I love about Delver is every time I go into a matchup, I don't feel like I'm favored, but I always feel like I'm able to win. And I have been doing pretty well recently. My most recent run with my newest list, I'm 17-3. And I was robbed of the 5-0. So effective 18-2 if you just ignore Dredge. And the deck just, it steals games from everything. People can play the Sultai Pile, which is like, it's Astrolabe, so you can't get Wastelanded. It's Ice Fang Quaddle, so you just get 2-for-1 Goyf. It's, it's Abrupt Decay, so you can remove everything. And then they play Uro, and you still beat it sometimes. Like sometimes you just go Delver, Dreadhorde Arcanist, and then Oko, and they can't catch up. Or sometimes you go Delver, Arcanist, and then Winter Orb is a card that I'm really high on right now for the snow matchups. Winter Orb is so good against them. When they're trying to spin their wheels and cantrip, Winter Orb is really good. It also makes Daze just literally free counterspell that resets a land for you. So you get to bounce a land that wouldn't untap under Winter Orb and counter their stuff because they're choked on mana. So Winter Orb, I'll definitely plug Winter Orb. It's a really good choice. But yeah, so like you can win anything with a good Delver draw.
So you heard it here first.
Plug in the Winter Orb.
Teamer Delver is the best deck with only bad matchups. Right from TwinlessTwin and the Arctic Art Gallery broke into.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this is some of the art you see in the background is all the art I made as a child. One of my more talented pieces I can feature.
This
real
is
quick
art that you
before
made
we
as a
wrap up.
child?
This one right here is one of
Oh
my
my
favorites.
God.
I don't know how
Wow.
well people can see it. it says phase on it, and I thought I was being original, but then it turns out it's just because I overheard my friends talking about FaZe Clan. I learned later, so I thought that the word phase, misspelling it, was super edgy, but then it wasn't, apparently. But yeah, so I was a pretty talented artist. Then all my focus went towards Magic, and I'm just not producing the quality artwork anymore.
We can produce quality sideboard guys together. That's art.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that Theo and I's Rug Delver intensive guide is going to be a work of art coming soon.
I'm still working on the mono green sideboard guy, by the way, Pete Turts.
All right. Let me know when that's on the OnlyFans.
That one's especially tricky.
It really is.
Right. Ready to wrap up this episode?
Yeah, I think so. So I think we should go one by one. I can start, then Theo, then Doom, and Twinless. Just if you have anything to say, anything you want to plug. I'll have everyone's social media links, Twitter, Twitch, or whatever, down in the description below. But yeah, so I am Pete Hearts to Win on Magic Online, Twitter, Twitch, killing the game. Go give me a follow on either of those. And if you're an Oiler, maybe sauce a sub. But yeah, other than that, how about you, Theo?
All right. I'm at Where'd My Jewel Go on Twitter. So give me a follow there. And I think I'm gonna have a Twitch stream starting soon.
Whoa!
Whoa!
As soon as I get some of my new.
Is this gonna be a rival Delver stream?
I don't know if it's purely a Delver stream. It might be a Death and Taxes meme stream.
We went from episode 1, no stream ever, to stream coming soon.
I know.
We're
Character development.
He wants to get on the hype. Starting out as a streamer is just the cool thing to do in 2020 in this corona infested world.
Nothing else to do.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
All right, how about you, Doom?
All right. So Doomwake, D00mwake on MTGO Twitter. Actually firing up a YouTube too. I'm actually currently working on my second video, so go check that out. And also just a very dry throat. So yeah, give me a follow there, Twitch, YouTube, all that stuff. And closing thoughts, play Gaia's Cradle and Pioneer before they ban it. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I guess to wrap things up, TwinlessTwin. I'm TwinlessTwin on Twitter. I am TwinlessTwin MTG on Twitch. And I'm doing a 30-day Delver stream right now. So if you are excited to play Delver, I've been streaming like 2 leagues and some premier events every day. And it's been a lot of fun so far. So definitely come check that out. And then, yeah, I guess closing thoughts for Legacy is if you're new to the format, I'd recommend Turbo Depths. I think that's a good deck that has some play to it and you can do well with. And if you are a Legacy veteran, then just run trusty old Rug Delver, and definitely don't call it Teamer Delver. I don't know why people keep doing that. It's just, you can't insult Rug's heritage like that. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you guys for having me on.
For sure. If you're make sure everyone to like the video of the podcast. Subscribe, comment down below if you have any questions or if you just want to give any feedback. But yeah, thanks Doom, thanks Twinless for coming on, and we will be back next week, same time, same channel and everything. All right, bye everyone, have a good one.
Bye.